Alright, well, I'm starting to cut out my transom bands. I've got this sheet of, geez, what is this, 304? I believe it's 304 stainless. It's very thin. This stuff is, it was bought as 22 gauge. It's thicker than that, but it's not quite 20 gauge. It's like in between. It's like a 21 gauge. It's kind of weird. But anyhow, you can see it does have some shine. You can see my rafters here in the top of it. This is just a small little rim chunk that was sitting around. But I've got my pattern drawn on here. I'm using, you can see right now the cut, I'm using a jigsaw. And I'm using the exact same 36 tooth per inch blades that I use when I'm cutting my 1/4 inch marine ply. Exact same blades. And it cuts with ease. Very, very, very easy. Very easy to stay right on the line. So here's the second one I'm cutting out. You can see my pattern. Here's the first one I have cut out. And here's my pattern up here. Again, no holes in it yet, but I've got the first one cut, roughly flap wheeled to shape, and I'm using my 4.5 inch grinder with a flap wheel after I get it cut close to the line to bring it right down to the line. And once I get this one to this point, I will line the two up, clamp them together, and then sand them uniformly together so they're a perfect match. At that point, then I'll lay out all my holes, get my holes drilled. But we're making good progress. I'm using this little neon tube light to illuminate the line as I'm cutting right over the top of it so that I don't stray off the line. But making good progress. We're cutting out some shinies. As you can see, I'm cutting on the outside edge of my line, and then I'll use my flap wheel to actually sand that back right to the inside edge of this black line. But you can see that jigsaw does a fine job cutting this sheet stainless. Alright, since I had some of this stainless left over, you can see the chunk that's sitting over there. I went ahead and you can see the dimples where I marked all of my holes where they're going to be in that in the transom bands. But I wanted to put a cap, I think I talked about it, I wanted to put a cap over the top of the transom where the motor will actually sit, cover up that plywood end grain, and look pretty nice. So I ended up measuring the thickness of that transom. It was 1 inch and 13/16, and I cut a straight strip off 1 inch and 13/16 all the way across. And hopefully you can see it. It's not polished up yet, but it's a very, very good fit to the boat. But I went ahead and took that and just started up at this side, drilling my screw holes and sticking it down. Then I bend it a bit, drill the next holes and screw it down, bend it a bit. And there was a lot of forming. I mean, this took me about, geez, I don't know, it took me probably 3 hours to bend that and screw it. And I just really quick hit the center with some Mother's Mag and aluminum just to see how it was going to polish out. I'll take this off and do a full polish on it, but turned out pretty darn good. Pretty happy with it. So I'll continue on the transom bands now. Making good progress. Looking pretty good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. This is my starboard transom band. It's completely flat. You can see I've got starboard back written on it. Ignore the polish. This is just a preliminary polish. You can see it's not, you can see scratches in it, things like that. I just hit it really quick by hand to take some of that mill top finish off of it. It'll look like chrome when it's done, but ignore the polish on it at the moment. So what I've done is I've drilled all of these holes, not the top two, but everything below that. I drilled them out to 9/64. Then I tapped them for 832 screws. So each one of these holes is tapped, as you can see through the backside. I've started threading them through. But there's actually just a couple threads through this stainless material. So what I do is I'll thread these all the way in, tighten them all up, and then I'll come back and cut all of the extra bolt heads or screw heads, machine screws off the back, or not the heads, but the threads that are protruding. So I'll cut them all flush. Most people would just use standard wood screws and screw this to the hull. But what like I've mentioned before in the past, I am deathly afraid of having penetrations in the hull, especially these 4 that would be below the waterline. I do not want penetrations in the hull. I mean, as few as possible, because ultimately that's the Achilles heel of a wood boat. Eventually, someday, sometime, no matter how good you seal this, I imagine it would eventually leak and start rotting the wood. So I don't want any penetrations, i.e. screws, below the waterline. So what I've decided to do is these top 2 will be the only 2 screws up into the top of the chine back here, or shear, I'm sorry. They'll be the only 2 screws that actually go through the stainless into the wood. The rest of these, I'm going to apply a material called 3M VHB tape. It's a 2-sided sticky tape. VHB stands for very high bond, and that stuff is like permanent. So what I'll do is I'll apply that. This entire back side will be that VHB tape. I'll use my 2 top holes as pilots to get it centered on the boat where it's going to be, and then I'll peel the backing off and then basically stick it to the side of the boat. Once I get the port and starboard side on there with the VHB tape tacking in place, I'll wrap a motorcycle tie down all the way around the back of the boat, right down the center of these transom bands, and snug that thing up tight to hold pressure on it while the VHB tape sets. It takes about 3 days to reach full strength, so I'll keep pressure on it for about 3 days. VHB also needs to be applied in 60-degree plus weather. Most people don't do this. Most people just screw it right to the side of the boat. Again, I'm not most people, and I'm not a boat builder. Kinda. I'm sort of a boat builder, I guess. But I'm not gonna do that. I do not want penetrations in the hull. I do not want a whole bunch of potential leaks or rotting spots in the sides of my boat. And that's why I'm doing it this way. So I've got the port side up here. You can see I've got it pretty well bent to the shape of the side of the boat. I've got all my screws in it. And then on the back side, you can see they are all cut and ground off flush, completely flush. So the only 2, again, that are gonna hold it will be the 2 up into the shear. I'll get that taped onto the side of the boat. Same thing with this, it's just a preliminary polish. It's not done, but it looks pretty good. You can still see minor scratches in it. When I'm done, it'll look like a mirror. So, again, just me being me and weird and not the norm, but I am deathly afraid of these 4 because they'll live below the waterline, creating a potential leak. We're not having it. So here's a look at the transom band. I just did a real quick pre-bend to kind of get it to fit the hull. But it's a nice uniform gap, about an 1/8 inch off the very back of the transom. It's about an 1/8 inch above the bottom of the boat. You can see I've got just a standard piece of Scotch tape just holding that thing flat against the hull. But transom band looks really nice, and then it's about an 1/8 inch below the shear up at the top. And both port and starboard are identical, exact same. So we'll walk around this side. There's the transom cutout cap. And here's a look at this transom band. And it's exactly the same. About an 1/8 inch down from the top, about an 1/8 inch gap from the back of the transom. Same thing, one piece of Scotch tape holding it. And again, I pre-bent this one to kind of fit. You can see there's a little bit of gap down here. But again, once I get that 3M VHB tape and apply it to it, then I'll do a final bend to get it to basically sit on the hull without any pressure. So that when I peel it, put my 2 screws in and stick it,
basically the bend itself will hold contact to the hull, and then I'll just again wrap the entire transom with a motorcycle tie down and suck it up tight to help keep pressure on that for 3 days while the 3M VHB tape sets. I think it looks pretty freaking awesome. Look at that. Making good progress. Alright, I've got a rim piece of 18 gauge stainless. I've got my 2 patterns sitting up here for the Cutwater. I'm getting the feeling that my steel supplier's starting to screw me. This stuff was labeled as 18 gauge, but when I brought my veneer calipers out and measured it, it measured 37 thousandths. 18 gauge should be 50 thousandths. So it's 13 thousandths thinner than it should be, which I don't think is going to make a big difference. The stuff's thin to begin with, but I'm pretty confident I can weld it. But anyhow, long story short, we're getting ready to draw and cut out our Cutwater patterns. So, making good progress. Alright, so we're partially way through cutting the first half of the Cutwater. You can see I started up here, cut into my pattern, and I'm trying to keep it on the outside line. Hopefully it'll focus here. It doesn't really want to. But anyhow, I'm cutting on the outside of my Sharpie mark, and then I'll sand it back to the Sharpie mark. So it should be a dead clone to my patterns. I'm using that same 36 tooth per inch cheapy blades. Stainless generates an enormous amount of heat, and it holds the heat right at the point where it's getting warm. It doesn't dissipate very easily, so it's really easy to smoke these blades. I think I went through 3 blades cutting out my transom bands, which is a much smaller part than these. So just kind of be prepared. I only cut about 1 inch at a time, and I'll let it cool, or maybe 3/4 of an inch at a time. Let it cool, come back, cut a little bit more, come back, cut a little bit more, to prolong the life of the blade. Again, these are really cheap blades, but I'm getting decent life out of them. Just know that they're pretty much throwaway. Once you see the blade start glowing, it's done. It's time to throw it away. But we're making good progress. Alright, well, we now have both halves of the Cutwater cut out. And you can probably see it. This is like a brushed finish on here. And I was a little worried how that was going to polish out. Because I don't have a lot of stainless experience. I have some, but not a lot. So here's a chunk of the rim, and you can see here I just hit it real quick with a little mothers. This is by hand, probably 30 seconds of polishing. And you know, it's not quite a mirror, but you can see that it is. Well, there's my hand, there's my phone. You can see it's a pretty darn good reflection. And again, that's a brushed finish, so 30 seconds by hand, I can make it damn near mirror-like. I'm pretty sure with a good machine buff, it'll turn out like a mirror. So making good progress. Now I got to start putting the two together. Well, it's officially February 1st, 2017. For the month of January 2017, we went up 12.5 hours. All of that was in stainless, and you can see we now have a new category, 12.5 hours in stainless work. So this month we went up $33.70, and that's just basically for a couple scrap pieces of sheet stainless in 22 gauge and 20 gauge. And some screws, so $33.70. So our 12.5 hours, that brings us up to 591 hours even on the Zip, and $33.70 brings us up to $6,720.20 invested in the Zip. So let's see where we're at. So this is pretty much where we're at. Not too much farther than the last little portion of the video, with the exception of I now have my holes drilled in both halves of my Cutwater. So you can see there's some Sharpie marks here on 4 holes. Here, here, right here, and right there. So these two will go into the shear, just like on the transom bands. They'll go up into the shear. So those will actually be screwed and drilled through the shear of the boat, through the stainless, into the wood on the boat. These two happened to hit right where the chine is. It's a real meaty, close to 2-inch thick piece that I'll be going through with two number 8 stainless wood screws. So there'll be 4 screws that'll hold this to the boat. The rest of them are dummy holes, exactly like the transom bands back here. So they're drilled, they are tapped, just like the transom band, same hole diameter, same tap, same everything. So these will be the exact same. I'll just run machine screws through them, snug them all up, cut them off on the back, and they're just for looks. This is, of course, after this is all welded together, everything's ground and sanded smooth and fully polished, then I'll come back and put the screws in it. Or maybe right before the fully polished mark, right in that time somewhere. And then right in here, roughly, is where my bow eye is going to be. Now, I've gone back and forth with a whole bunch of different methods of how to attach the bow eye. Originally, I was going to do, maybe like this row of 6 screws and weld the bow eye onto here, cut the all thread off of it. Again, I'm going to be using the exact same bow eye that I used in my transom, exact same style, length, everything. I ordered that through Glen-L. It's a 6-inch stainless bow eye. But anyhow, originally I was going to take the stainless all thread out of the back and just weld it directly to this, and then use these 6 screws to basically screw it to the front of the boat. Although, I kind of changed my mind on that because I don't like the idea of the entire weight of the boat being held onto my trailer with 6 number 8 screws. Who knows how much this is going to end up costing me when everything's done, but I didn't want to put the entire faith of my, probably $10,000 to $14,000 investment in 6 number 8 stainless screws. So I decided to modify that a bit. What I'm going to do is, after this is all welded up and it fits good, prior to polish work, I'm going to locate my bow eye, and of course, this will be a peak like angle iron. I'll drill my bow eye hole right through here. I'll drill it all the way through the stem of the boat. I'll then place that bow eye on my cutwater and weld the bow eye all the way around to both halves of the cutwater. It'll be one piece at that time. But basically, when I go to install this, the bow eye will be welded to the cutwater, and you'll just grab that cutwater, slip it through the hole in the bow, put the bolt on the back side of the bow eye all thread on the back side of the stem, and then screw in these 4 screws. So really all of the strength is going to be in that bow eye bolted through the stem of the boat. I just think it's a more secure way to go about it. I feel a whole lot better with 4 screws and a 3/8 stainless bolt holding the boat to the trailer than I do just 6 little number 8 screws. So I think that's the route I'm going to go. Again, I bounced back and forth with this idea of several different methods and different ways of accomplishing the same thing. I think the bow eye is going to look really good welded to the center of the cutwater and then completely smoothed out. I think it'll look really nice. Kind of seamless look. But anyhow, this is where I'm at. I don't know when I'm going to get back to actually welding the 2 halves of the cutwater together. Maybe this month, maybe next month. It all depends. I have to pick up some 023 308 stainless wire for my Miller MIG that's over there in the corner. So I've got to pick up stainless wire. I also have to pick up a rental bottle of tri-mix or stainless mix. Right now I'm running a steel mix, which is, you can't hardly see it, but there's my little bottle standing up back there. And that's steel mix 7525. I need a tri-mix for stainless with a high helium content, just to get it to flow better. So I've got to pick up that bottle, I have to pick up the wire, and then I can continue on this. And I'm not sure when I'm going to get to that, but the hard part, I think, is over anyhow. The patterns are cut. They're an exact duplicate to my patterns back here. So they're identical, the pieces are. All the holes are drilled, tapped, and now it's just weld time. So when I get to it, I get to it. But we're making fantastic progress. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please subscribe, rate, and comment. Love reading your guys' comments, and we will catch you on the next update of building the Zip.